Why don't you get the president to tell them to leave the Capitol, Mr. Attorney General, in your law enforcement responsibility? A public statement, they should all leave.
President Trump had a premeditated plan to declare that the election was fraudulent and stolen before Election Day.
It does appear, though, in that video that the police response is already there. There's a heavier police response. You're seeing sheriff's deputies. You're seeing other officers with heavily armed weaponry.
We're here today to protest against gun violence towards schools and local public places in general. Our message is to get the government to understand that this has happened way too many times.
Video is Cody Greenland. On the afternoon of April 17th, 2020, he was confronted by officers. Complying, he got to his knees, and then he was blindsided. Here's
the Sheriff's Department says Anderson was taken to a hospital for some minor injuries. Devermont says
Do what you gotta do. No.
Fury from those campaigning to keep the guaranteed right to abortion, promising to fight back.
It's not the will of the people, and this country is supposed to run off of the will of the people. I'm 21 and I'm terrified.
This decision, the conservative majority of the Supreme Court shows how extreme it is, how far removed they are from the majority of this country.
8 in 10 Americans say the economy is in bad shape, and consumer confidence today hit a new low.
Why this is happening to us?
What is the direct cause to make these gas prices go up?
What are you guys doing to fix that?
President Joe Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act. The bill includes the biggest federal investment in history to fight climate change, a cap for out-of-pocket prescription drug costs for Medicare, and then money to help millions pay for health insurance. These measures will be paid for by new taxes on large companies and stepped up IRS enforcement of wealthy individuals and entities.
So which of these issues is going to be on your mind when you go to the polls? This is NewsRap, the national edition. Well, welcome. I'm Barry Gordon. You haven't seen this face for a long time, and I'm just happy that I get a chance to sit in this chair again and share with you some thoughts about the upcoming midterm elections. And I have a very special person to do it with, a good friend of mine, a wonderful author, a wonderful professor at Occidental College, Peter Dreier. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Barry.
It's always great to have you here.
It's good to be here.
So, how are we going to do?
Well, if by we, you mean the Democrats.
I mean the Democrats. Yeah,
okay.
I let it all hang out here, and you guys know that when I say we, I mean the Democrats. Okay. You may not be, I understand that, but okay. Yeah.
So right now, at the national level, we're having midterm elections, and there could be a Republican sweep of the House and the Senate, which would make Joe Biden a lame duck for the next 2 years and unable to do anything. In order for him to advance what is probably the most progressive agenda since Roosevelt or even Roosevelt, he needs both to hold on to the House and expand the number of Democrats, and also add 1 or 2 more Democrats in the Senate, partly to make it impossible for Joe Manchin to stop good things from happening.
Right. Now, the House is a very tough hill to climb, right? Well, because we're going against history.
History shows that when a president gets elected, the next midterm elections, the opposite party almost always gains seats in both the House and the Senate. It's only not happened twice. Sure. But you never know. And there's a lot of people right now thinking that the Democrats, as unpopular as Biden is, the Democrats have an advantage on 2 things. One, lots of women are really angry about the Republican Supreme Court's decision on abortion, the Dobbs decision. And women are now registering to vote at much higher rates than they have in the last decade or so. If they all turn out and they all vote for the party that supports a woman's right to choose, even in swing congressional races in swing states like Pennsylvania and Atlanta, that could make a difference. The Democrats could win. The Democrats also have an advantage in the sense that Donald Trump is really unpopular, and almost everybody that he endorses is tainted with that. And there are a growing number of Republicans who are not MAGA Republicans. They're moderate Republicans, and they probably can't bring themselves to hold their nose and vote for Democrats, but they might stay home. And if they stay home, then that's an advantage for the Democrats.
Can California do it alone? Can they deliver the House to the Democrats alone?
No. There are not enough swing districts in California. Christy Smith could win in her district up in northern LA County. That would defeat a Republican. There's 1 or 2 races in Orange County where the Democrats could beat a Republican incumbent. But nationally, the Democrats have to take about 10 or 12 seats that are swing states, swing districts. And in North Carolina, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio. And those are up for grabs right now.
See, I'm angry right now, and I want to see if you share this anger or if you share the concern that's behind the anger, because I feel that the American people, at least the ones that are being polled currently, and that we don't know what that means, have really lost sight of how close we have come to losing our democracy, and not only have lost sight of it, but don't really seem to care very much. That there's a sense that, I would have thought that this election was about that. And it's not turning out to be. It's turning out to be, oh, my gas prices are too high, or why isn't Biden curing inflation, which of course no president can do.
Right. Well,
and it's an international problem. It's a global economic problem. So I'm concerned that maybe the American people don't understand what democracy is, what it has to be, what it should be, and that worries me.
Most people care about paying the rent, paying the mortgage, sending their kids to college, being able to afford college tuition, being able to live in a safe neighborhood. That's the day-to-day bread and butter issues, right? Some people care about what you might call social or moral issues about abortion, right? Most people don't think about politics in terms of whether or not democracy is suffering, right? And the Democrats have tried to make that an issue through the hearings over the last couple of months, and they had pretty good ratings on television. And the day after the hearings, the polls showed that people really cared about them. But it's hard to sustain over a long period of time when your wages aren't going up as fast as the gas prices are, right? So I'm not surprised by that, right? On the other hand, I also think that the issue of the allegedly stolen elections, right, also has its limits, because most people, if they vote, they're pretty confident their vote will be counted. Now, that's not true of Republicans, but in terms of Democrats, they're going to turn out for the bread and butter issues, and also they're going to turn out because they don't want another Republican on the Supreme Court, and they don't want another Republican in the White House, and they figure that this is a test. This midterm election is a test about whether Trump is going to prevail, even though he's not going to run for office for another 2 years. He's running now.
Right.
Right. But and so this is kind of a dress rehearsal for the 2024 elections. And if the Democrats prevail, then I don't think Trump will run, because he knows he's going to lose the 2024 election. And that's good news if that happens.
What do you think the likelihood is that would happen?
I think the Democrats will pick up 1 or 2 seats in the Senate. And whether they are able to hold on to the House really depends on, in the last 3 weeks of the campaign, which is starting next week, their what's called GOTV, their Get Out the Vote effort, is successful. Stacey Abrams in Georgia is a master at Get Out the Vote, so you'd expect that she'll be able to prevail in the governor's race. But she's not running.
She's been running behind.
Right, but she's not running against a Trump candidate. She's running against a guy who's sort of a Trumpy, you know, the current governor, Kemp, who stole the election 4 years ago. And so she's having a hard time. But the Warnock campaign is, you know, her efforts to turn out the vote for Warnock are probably going to help him defeat Herschel Walker, the football player and professional liar. And so I think it really depends on the state. I'm pretty sure that in Pennsylvania the Senate candidate will win and also win for governor. And there's a few others like that. So, but the House it always depends on Get Out the Vote. And the Democrats have more money this year than the Republicans do.
Which is unusual.
Yes. And if they spend it wisely, not on TV commercials, but on door knocking and people-to-people politics, then they can make a difference. Same thing's true here in Pasadena. If the tenants show up to vote, Pasadena will pass rent control. And if they don't, then there won't be rent control, right? So at the local level and at every level of government, it's sort of what Tip O'Neill once said, all politics is local.
Yeah.
And, you know, and local in many ways means, can people turn out to vote? And the Democrats have the disadvantage that the people that support Democratic policies tend to be people with low voter turnout, right, in general. So they have to make an extra push, right? But I also think that, you know, despite the fact that there's this MAGA world out there that, you know, it's hard to fathom that people still believe the 2020 election was stolen, there's a, you know, 50 to 60 to 70% of the Republican Party still thinks Trump is a god, right? But his support among registered Republicans is declining. And so if they don't turn out to vote, then in these swing congressional races in places like Ohio and Pennsylvania and North Carolina, the Democrats could even win those. So, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do think that it's not hopeless for the Democrats to win both the Senate and the House.
Well, the percentages right now aren't there to win the House. They are there to win the Senate, and to hold the Senate and to extend in the Senate.
Well, if they lose the House, it doesn't matter.
What is our love of divided government? What is that? Why do we love divided government? I mean, you know, David Mayhew wrote books about it and said, oh, it's not that bad. But I find it horrible. I mean, I really do, because I think that, first of all, the Republican agenda is to stifle government activities. Right. So if you have divided government, all you need is one house, and you've stifled government activity. So it's not an even race here.
The founding fathers started this country in protest against a king, a monarch, King George. And so when they decided to set up the Constitution and to figure out what kind of government we're going to have, they made a very conscious decision. We want as weak a government as possible. And we want to have what they call checks and balances. And that means, in part, that we'll have a presidency and a Supreme Court and a House and a Senate. And they could all be of different, you know, different parties. It didn't have to be Democrat or Republican.
But divided government is a more recent phenomenon. Even with the constitutional barriers, we still didn't have divided. I mean, generally, the Whigs, you know, held both houses and were able to do things, and the Democrats were able to do things, and the Federalists were. So I just don't understand our current love for it, because it's almost like whenever a politician or a leader gets in a position of doing something, America says, well, no, we don't really want you to do anything. And that's what it seems like on a collective
I think most voters, I know that most voters don't vote for people of different parties. If you look at where most voters vote straight Democrat or state Republican.
Yeah, and ticket splitting is getting less and less and less.
So it's not like theoretically the American people want divided government.
Right.
It's what happens when you have two things, right? One, you have the Democrats winning the popular vote, right? But because of gerrymandering, they don't get enough people into office, right? So like in Michigan, for example, in the last election, the vast majority of voters voted for Democrats, but because of the way they carved up the congressional seats, the majority of the Michigan congressional delegation is Republican.
Sure.
Right? So that's not a love of divided government. That's the consequences of rigging the rules, of the Republicans rigging the rules to make it easier for them to win, even in states where they don't have a popular mandate. And so I think that's what's going on.
Yeah. Is police violence a big issue in this midterm election?
It's a big issue in municipal elections. It's not a big issue for Congress or for the Senate. People realize that crime and police issues and racial profiling by cops and unaccountable cops is mostly a local issue. Now, Biden actually
but gun safety isn't.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, gun safety is most gun laws that have changed in the last couple of years have been at the local and state level because the NRA is so powerful in Congress. But even that's waning a bit.
Yeah.
And Biden and the Democrats did pass a gun control law in the last year, which has had, which will have some impact. But they can't do what they really want to do, which is to ban Uzis and military-style assault weapons and have background checks at the national level. And it doesn't appear to be that the Republicans or the Democrats are focusing much on that in most of the House or the Senate races. But here in Los Angeles, the issue of crime, not guns, but crime and homelessness are being conflated by the Rick Caruso.
Yeah.
And he's bludgeoning Karen Bass with that, even though she hasn't been a local official. She's been in Congress. I still think she'll win, but he's going to come closer than he should, mostly because he's spending $70 million of his own money.
I can usually do it,
Yeah.
but not always, as Michael Bloomberg knows. So, immigration, I mean, it's becoming very strange now. I mean, with DeSantis sending, the migrants to Martha's Vineyard and Greg Abbott sending them to D.C. and it's just really getting weird. It's almost becoming theater, and not very good theater. Is that going to cut both ways? Because there has been some concern that the Democrats may not have as solid a hold on the Latino vote as they once thought they did.
Right. Probably about 65 to 70% of Latinos around the country will vote for the Democrats, or it will vary from place to place.
Yeah.
In 2020, Trump did a lot better among Latinos in Texas than he had in 2016, for example.
And he did well in Florida.
Right. So immigration, the Republicans are trying to make immigration an issue, and they're basically, their commercials are incredibly racist, and they're basically saying they're taking your jobs, they're causing crime. There's actually no evidence of either of those things, but that's what they're saying, and if enough people believe it, then it'll have an impact. But the public opinion polls show that a vast majority of Americans believe that most undocumented immigrants should have the right to be naturalized over time. They don't believe in having a big wall separating the United States and Mexico. They believe that parents shouldn't be separated from their kids. I mean, all the things that Trump did. Americans, I think I give them credit for being more compassionate and understanding around the immigration issue. But if 5 or 10 or 15% of the voting public gets riled up by immigration, right, in a swing race where it's going to be decided by 2 or 3% of the vote, then it could have a big issue, could have a big impact.
What are you going to be looking at on election night?
I'm going to be looking at my television.
Obviously.
And
what races?
yeah, I'm going to be looking at Pennsylvania and Georgia in particular, and North Carolina for a couple of congressional House seats. And I'm going to be looking at turnout numbers. And one of the things that's changed in American politics and makes it harder for people like me to wrap our heads around it is so many people now are voting by mail early, right? And so politics is a lot different now. So, you know, right now you have to attract voters a month and a half before the election, right? Because they're starting to vote already.
Sure.
So I'll be looking to see whether or not turnout is growing among the people that didn't vote by mail. And if it's growing, that probably helps the Democrats, right? And so you know how they have on television, on CNN, they'll say, you know, we've counted 20% of the vote and this is what it looks like so far. In those swing areas in Pennsylvania and in Florida and in a couple of other states, I think turnout, again, is going to make all the difference, and that's what I'll be looking to see whether the Democrats have used their resources wisely to get people to vote. I've got
John King, not Steve Kornacki?
Yeah, either way. Yeah, they're both sort of brilliant at. They know every county. Both of those guys know every county in America.
In America,
yeah, and they can tell you like what the vote was 2 years ago and 4 years ago and 6 years ago. But I tend to be an optimist, but I try not to be a Pollyanna. So you know, I'm not. You know, would I bet on the Democrats keeping their majority in the House? A couple of bucks, but not not my last paycheck.
Yeah. We're going to have another discussion at another time, because what we didn't get to talk about much was Biden. Who will be sort of in the background of all of this.
Right.
I guess we do have a couple of minutes, so I could talk a little bit about him. He's what, around 41%, 42% now. It's better than he was,
right.
And it's certainly higher than Trump ever was, pretty much. But what is the issue with Biden? Because Biden, as you said, has probably done more just passing important legislation since, I'll go with LBJ, but you might be right, it might be going all the way back to FDR, without being ideological. Would he be better off being ideological? Do you think that maybe if he really put forward a progressive vision, it would stimulate the kind of turnout, stimulate the kind of movement? You know, it's interesting, and you and I were talking earlier, that a lot of empirical studies and a lot of authors and commentators have said the difference between the Republican and the Democratic Party is that the Republicans put forward a philosophy, a vision, an ideology, and the Democrats put forward a laundry list. They put forward, you know, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. And it's not as, the laundry list isn't as stimulating as a philosophy or a vision. Do you think we'll ever get there? Do you see someone who can put forward that vision effectively?
Well, I think that Republicans have a simple vision, but it's easy to understand. Government's bad and business is good.
Right.
Right. And then they throw in their stuff, racism and homophobia and nativism. But their basic message is we don't need government, right? Or we need as little government as possible. Trump didn't ever say that.
No.
He was very different from almost every other Republican. The Democrats have a harder hill to climb, which is we think government is important. We think it improves people's lives, and here's how we want to do it. And in order to do it, we have to tax people. And to tax people, we want to tax mostly people with, at the top of the income bracket. But, middle-class people are going to get taxed as well. And so it's more complicated to explain the Democratic vision.
Yeah.
And unlike FDR, and even unlike Johnson, and certainly unlike Obama, Biden doesn't have the charisma or the speaking ability to articulate not only a vision, but to even look like he's in charge, right?
We'll have to leave it there.
Okay. Right.
But with him not looking like he's in charge.
Yeah.
But you're in charge. So go. If you haven't already voted by mail, vote however you vote. Only once, but vote. Peter, thank you so much. Peter Dreier.
My pleasure.
From Occidental College, I'm Barry Gordon. This has been NewsRap National Edition. Fun to be back.